The girl had always felt most at peace when she stood outside the old music hall, listening to the sounds that floated out through the narrow windows. She never dared to go inside, not because she feared the people, but because she believed the hall belonged to a world she could only admire from a distance. Every afternoon, when the sun softened and the air cooled, she would slip quietly to the side of the building and close her eyes, letting the warm, rich sound of the piano fill her. It was the closest she had ever come to lessons. Her family lived only a few streets away, in a small home where the walls were thin and the days were full of work rather than music. Her parents were kind and gentle, but simple folk who had never even touched a piano, let alone imagine paying for lessons. She understood this. She never asked them for anything more than what they could give. But something inside her always reached out when she heard music, as if the notes called her name. She did not remember the first day she began standing outside the hall. It had started so naturally, like breathing. She would walk home from school with her bag hanging off her shoulder, stop near the tall glass windows, and wait. Sometimes she listened for minutes, sometimes for an hour, depending on how long the class went on. And in those moments, she forgot the world around her. The sound wrapped around her like a blanket, and she could almost imagine her fingers on a keyboard, playing the notes herself. Inside, the maestro taught with a calm but sharp voice. He was known for his strict ways, yet he spoke with a deep love for music. People respected him, even feared disappointing him. He had white hair that brushed the top of his ears, and a pair of glasses that always rested at the bridge of his nose. His hands were strong and sure, shaped by years of guiding young students to find their own sound. He noticed the girl long before he ever spoke to her. At first, he thought she was simply passing by. Then he realized she always came at the same time, always stood in the same quiet spot, always listened with the same stillness. Some days he wondered if she understood what she was hearing. Other days he forgot about her altogether, lost in the rhythm of teaching, but she never forgot him. She watched the way he moved, the way he corrected the students, the way he explained how music was not about pressing keys, but about speaking without words. She learned more from watching him than he could have ever imagined. One warm afternoon, when most of the students had already gone home, the girl stood as usual by the window. She leaned forward slightly, listening to the maestro speak to one last student. The boy inside was young and impatient, tapping the keys too hard and rushing through the notes. The maestro corrected him again, then again, and finally shook his head with a tired sigh. "You cannot force music," he said to the boy. "You must feel it. You must listen to it. Slow down." The boy didn't look convinced. He tried again, but the notes came out stiff, uneven, and sharp. After a few minutes, the maestro ended the lesson early. The boy grabbed his bag, thanked him quickly, and hurried out the front door without much thought. The maestro sat at the piano alone, rubbing his forehead. He tried the same piece the boy had stumbled through, his fingers relaxed and steady. The melody filled the room like soft water flowing over stones. The girl closed her eyes. She had heard this piece many times now, each time from outside. She could tell when a student missed a note, when the timing was off, and when the maestro had to stop them. She could even tell when the maestro himself was tired. Suddenly the music stopped. She opened her eyes. The maestro was looking toward the window. He couldn't see her directly because of the angle, but he sensed movement outside. For a moment, he simply stared. Curiosity pushed him to stand up. He walked to the door, opened it, and stepped outside. The girl froze. Her heart jumped, and she gripped her school bag tight. "You," he said in a gentle but firm voice. "Come here." She hesitated. She had never spoken to him before. She had never spoken to anyone from the music hall before. Her feet felt heavy, but she forced herself to take small steps toward him. When she reached the door, she lowered her eyes. The maestro studied her for a moment. Up close, she looked even younger than he thought. Her hair was tied back in a simple braid, her clothes worn but clean. She looked like someone who had learned to live with very little. "How long have you been standing out here?" he asked. She swallowed. I don't know, sir. I just listen. You listen every day." "Why?" She hesitated again. "I like the sound. I like how it feels." The maestro tilted his head slightly, watching her expression. She looked shy, but sincere. There was no boldness in her, no intention of asking for anything. "Do you play the piano?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I've never touched one." A soft wind blew across the doorway. For some reason he couldn't explain, the maestro felt intrigued and a little confused. Most children who loved music did everything they could to learn it. But this girl had done nothing except stand outside the window. "Come inside," he finally said. She blinked in surprise. "Inside?" "Yes. Come." He stepped back, leaving space for her. Her heart pounded. She took a slow breath and stepped into the hall. The air smelled faintly of wood, polish, and dust. The room felt bigger from the inside. The piano looked grand, almost too large for her small frame. The maestro closed the door gently behind her. "Do not worry," he said. "I will not scold you. I simply want to ask something." He walked toward the piano and motioned for her to follow. Her steps were small but steady. She stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the shining black surface of the instrument. "You watch my lessons," he said. "Do you understand what I teach?" "A little," she whispered. "Show me." "Sit here." She almost stepped back. She had never expected this. But the maestro's face held no anger, only curiosity. Slowly, she sat on the piano bench. Her legs were short and her feet barely touched the ground. "Place your hands on the keys," he said. She did as he asked. The keys felt cool against her fingers. She felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. "Play a scale," he said. "Do you know what that is?" She nodded faintly. She had seen his students do it so many times. Her fingers trembled slightly. She pressed the first key, then the next, rising little by little until she reached the top. The notes came out clean, even, and gentle. The maestro's eyebrows lifted. He did not expect that. "Now go down," he said quietly. She followed his instruction. The downward scale was just as smooth. The maestro walked around her slowly, as if seeing something that didn't quite make sense. "Who taught you that?" he asked. "No one," she said. "I just watched." He tried not to show his surprise. "Play it again." Slowly. She played it again. Still perfect. He tapped his chin with one finger. "Try this." He played a short, simple pattern of notes, one that beginners struggled with at first. She watched his hand closely, then copied it without hesitation. The maestro's eyes widened just a little. "Again," he said. She repeated it flawlessly. The room grew very quiet. Dust floated gently in the sunlight coming through the window. The maestro stood there, staring at this quiet girl who had learned through a window what others learned through months of lessons. "Play something you remember," he said softly. She looked up at him, confused. "Remember?" "Yes, anything you have heard." She looked at the keys. Her fingers hovered over them. She took a slow breath. Then she began to play. It was a melody she had heard many times from inside the hall. A piece the maestro played when he wanted his students to feel emotion instead of technique. She had never touched a piano before today, yet her fingers moved as if they already knew the way. The notes flowed gently, rising and falling in warm waves. She played softly, almost shyly, but each note was placed with care. She moved through the melody with a natural rhythm, not perfect but full of feeling. The maestro did not speak. He did not move. He simply watched. She reached the end of the piece, lifted her hands, and looked at him with nervous eyes. He took a deep breath, almost forgetting to let it out. "Stand up," he said quietly. She stood. Worried she had done something wrong, he walked to the window and looked outside for a moment, as if trying to make sense of what he had just heard. Then he turned to her. "How long have you been listening outside my lessons?" he asked again, but this time his voice held something deeper. She shrugged a little. "Since last year, I think? Every day?" She nodded. He rubbed his jaw. "And you learned like this? Simply by listening?" She looked down. "I don't know, I just remember the sound." He stared at her for a long moment. Something stirred inside him, a mix of surprise, curiosity, something close to disbelief. Finally, he said, come again tomorrow. At the same time, I want to see something. Her eyes widened. You want me to come here? Yes. Do not be late. She nodded, still unsure if she had misunderstood him. The maestro walked to the door and opened it for her. She stepped outside, the warm air brushing her face. She looked back once, meeting his gaze. He gave a small nod, not quite a smile, but softer than before. She walked home with her heart racing, her mind full of the sound of the piano. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in her life she felt like she was stepping into a world she had only watched from the outside. And the maestro, watching her leave, felt something he had not felt in years, a quiet sense of anticipation. He had no idea yet how far her talent reached. But he knew one thing for certain: this was no ordinary girl. The next day arrived more slowly than any day she could remember. She woke up early, long before the sun had fully risen, and sat on the edge of her small bed, feeling her heart beating a little too fast. Her home was quiet, the soft sounds of her family preparing for the day drifting through the thin walls. She kept thinking about the maestro's voice from yesterday. Come again tomorrow. Those words replayed in her mind over and over. She wondered if he meant it. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he had just been curious in the moment. Maybe he only wanted her to show the scale again, and nothing more. She tried not to expect anything, but her excitement kept growing despite her efforts. When she got dressed, she chose her simple clothes, the ones she wore every day. But she brushed her hair with more care than usual. Her mother noticed her unusual energy. Why are you up so early? Her mother asked with a small smile. No reason, she answered softly, not wanting to explain too much. She was afraid the moment would disappear if she talked about it. She ate quickly, barely tasting the food, and grabbed her school bag. She stepped outside and felt the cool morning air on her face. Every step toward the music hall felt like a step into a new world. Her school day passed slowly. She couldn't focus on the lessons, couldn't keep her mind from drifting to the piano, the maestro, and the room she had never imagined entering. When the final bell rang, she walked faster than usual, her feet almost carrying her on their own. When she reached the music hall, she paused outside the door. She didn't want to enter too early. She didn't want the students to stare at her or wonder why she was there, so she waited by the side of the building, the place she knew so well. Inside, she could hear voices and the soft echo of notes being played. The maestro's lessons were still going on. She stood quietly, listening, trying to calm her nerves. She didn't know what he would ask her to do today. Yesterday had felt almost like a dream. Minutes passed, maybe longer. The sounds inside gradually faded. Doors opened, students spoke with each other, and footsteps echoed as they left. She heard their laughter, their complaints, their confidence. She wondered if she would ever feel that comfortable inside. Finally, the room grew quiet again. The maestro stepped outside the front door, looked around, and spotted her. His expression didn't show surprise. It was as if he expected her to be exactly where she was. You're here, he said simply. She nodded. Come, he said, opening the door. She followed him inside. The familiar scent of wood, polish, and warm air wrapped around her again. This time, she didn't stop at the doorway. She walked deeper into the room, still feeling out of place but no longer frozen by fear. The maestro didn't speak at first. He went to the piano and adjusted the bench. Then he turned to her. Sit. She sat, her feet dangling slightly above the floor. I want to understand something, he said, moving to stand beside her. When you played yesterday, it was not something you could copy by accident. You remembered details. You remembered structure. You remembered feeling. Have you always been able to remember sound like that? She stared at the piano keys. I don't know. I just hear it in my head, like it stays there. The maestro studied her face again, trying to understand the quiet puzzle in front of him. Play the same piece from yesterday, he said. She nodded and placed her hands on the keys. She took a slow breath and began. This time she played with more confidence. The notes came more clearly, her hands moving more smoothly. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. She let the sound guide her. The maestro watched her fingers closely. Her technique was far from refined, but her natural instinct was undeniable. She was doing things no beginner should be able to do. When she finished, he asked, "Can you play something else you've heard?" She nodded again. She began to play a different melody, one she had heard the students practicing months ago. It was a piece the maestro had stopped teaching because most of his students found it too difficult. Yet she played it with surprising accuracy. He folded his arms slowly. There was no smile on his face, no sign of pride or excitement, just deep, thoughtful confusion. "Stop," he finally said. She removed her hands immediately. The maestro began pacing. He walked slowly across the wooden floor, his shoes tapping softly. She watched him nervously, unsure if she had done something wrong. "Do you understand what you're doing?" he asked at last. "No," she whispered. He sighed. "Neither do I." He approached her again. "Listen, you have something very rare. Most children learn by being shown. You learned by listening. And you've learned well. But music is not just memorizing. It is discipline, practice, structure. If you wish to continue, you must work very hard. Do you understand?" She nodded quickly. "Good, then we will start." He sat beside her on the bench. He placed his hands on the piano and showed her a very simple exercise, one even younger students practiced. She watched him closely, not just his fingers, but how he pressed the keys, how he used his wrist, how his hand moved like it was part of the piano. "Your turn," he said. She copied him. Her technique was clumsy at first. She pressed too lightly, then too hard. Her wrist was stiff, her movements uneven. "Relax your hand," he said gently. She tried again, better again. She repeated the motion again and again, slowly improving. The maestro corrected her quietly. He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold her. He treated her not as someone who had intruded on his classroom, but as a student with potential. She felt something warm inside hers, something that made her want to do even better. After half an hour, the maestro stood up. "Enough for today." She looked up, surprised. "That's all?" "Yes. Learning takes time. I don't want you to copy blindly. I want you to understand." She nodded, though she wished the lesson could go on longer. Before she left, the maestro told her, "Come again tomorrow. We will continue." Her heart lifted. "Yes, sir." She walked home with a lighter step than before. The world looked brighter somehow. Every sound felt richer. She kept replaying the exercises in her mind, tapping her fingers against her leg as she walked. When she reached home, her parents asked about her day. She smiled and simply said, "It was good." She didn't know how to explain what was happening. She didn't want to speak too soon. She didn't want to break the fragile magic that had just begun. The next day she returned, and the day after that. Soon, it became a routine. After school, she went straight to the music hall. The maestro greeted her with the same calm expression each time. He never asked her about her life, never tried to know more than what he needed to teach. But she felt his growing interest. He wanted to understand her gift. Sometimes the hall was empty except for the two of them. Sometimes other students finished late and saw her inside. They whispered among themselves, wondering who she was and why the maestro spent time teaching her alone. One afternoon, two girls lingered by the door as she practiced. She heard them whisper, "Who is she?" One said, "I think she's new," the other replied. "The maestro never teaches anyone new without telling us." "That's strange. She doesn't even look like a student here." Their voices were soft but sharp enough to reach her ears. She kept her eyes on the piano, trying not to let their words break her focus. The maestro noticed. He walked past them and said firmly, "If you have time to whisper, you have time to practice." The girls quickly left. The girl looked up at him. He didn't meet her eyes, but his tone was enough to show that he didn't want anything to distract her. "You will play again," he said. She played. He corrected her. He guided her. He pushed her. Days passed into weeks. Her improvement was faster than he expected, faster than she herself understood. Her fingers grew stronger. Her timing improved. Her memory sharpened. Yet she remained humble, soft-spoken, unsure if she deserved any of this. One day, after a longer lesson, the maestro sat back and crossed his arms. "You learn quickly," he said. She looked down shyly. "I'm trying, yes, but there is something more." Leaned slightly forward. "I want to test you." She blinked. "Test me?" "Yes. Not today. Soon. Something small. Something simple. But I want to see how you play in front of others." Her heart tightened. She had never played in front of anyone, except him. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "No one is ever ready," he replied. "That is why we test. Tss. To see. To learn." She took a shaky breath. "Do you trust me?" he asked. She nodded. "Good, then you will be fine." The thought of playing in front of others made her nervous, but the maestro's steady presence gave her courage. She wanted to make him proud, even if she didn't say it out loud. Over the next week, he trained her more intensely. He chose a short piece one that required feeling more than skill. His goal was not perfection. It was expression. "Let them hear your heart," he said, "not your hands." She practiced until her fingers ached. She replayed the music in her mind, even when she wasn't at the piano. The day of the test grew closer. One afternoon, after a long session, she looked up at him and said in a quiet voice, "Why me?" The maestro paused. "What do you mean?" "You have many students. They have been here longer. They know more. Why teach me?" He looked at her for a long time, then finally said, "Because some doors open only once, and when they do, you do not ignore them." She didn't fully understand, but the warmth in his voice stayed with her. When she left the hall that day, the sun was setting. The sky was painted in soft orange and pink. She felt tired but filled with a quiet hope. She didn't know it yet, but the maestro's test would be the moment that changed everything, not just for her, but for him as well. And as she walked home, she held on to one thought. If the piano had given her a place in this world, she would give it everything she had. The morning of the test arrived with a strange mix of excitement and fear. Pressing against her chest, she woke up earlier than usual, long before the world outside her window came alive. The sky was still dim, and the air held a coolness that made her shiver. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands as if they no longer belonged to her. These hands, which had barely touched a piano until a short time ago, were now expected to play in front of others. Her heart pounded with every thought. She wondered if the maestro believed too much in her. She wondered if she would disappoint him. She wondered if she would freeze or forget everything the moment she sat in front of the piano. She had never been tested like this before. Her home was quiet. Her parents still asleep as she sat quietly in the soft morning light. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She kept remembering the maestro's words. No one is ever ready. By the time she left for school, the world had woken up. Children walked down the street with their bags swinging on their shoulders. Shops were opening, and people greeted each other with sleepy voices. She walked slowly, her thoughts heavy, her fingers tapping against her leg as though searching for the notes she had practiced. The school day passed in a blur. She did not hear most of what her teacher said. She stared at the clock, waiting for the hands to move faster. Her stomach twisted whenever she thought of the small audience that would watch her. A group of students who already knew how to play, who belonged to the music hall, who might laugh if she made a mistake. But she kept remembering the maestro's calm voice, steady look in his eyes. When school finally ended, she walked to the music hall. Her feet moved slowly, as if each step required effort. When she arrived, she paused outside, letting her breath settle. She could hear faint sounds from inside, footsteps, soft voices, tuning notes. She stood still for a moment. This hall, where she used to listen from outside the windows, now felt like another home. Still, today felt different. Today, she wasn't a quiet observer. Today, she was meant to sit in front of everyone. When she finally walked inside, the maestro was already waiting. He stood near the piano with his hands behind his back, his expression calm, unreadable. "You came," he said. She nodded. "Are you nervous?" he asked. She whispered, "Yes." "Good," he said. "Nervous means you care. Do not try to remove it. Use it. She didn't quite understand how nervousness could help, but she trusted him. He motioned for her to sit on a chair near the piano while he prepared the room. A few students sat in the front row of chairs, whispering among themselves. Some looked curious. Some looked confused. She recognized one or two from days she had practiced while they passed by. The maestro clapped his hands once. Quiet. The room stilled. He looked at the girl. Come here. She stood slowly and walked to the piano. The room felt larger than usual. She sat on the bench, feeling every eye on her. Her hands trembled and she placed them on her lap for a moment, hoping no one noticed. The maestro stepped beside her. You will play the piece we practiced, he said in a soft voice only she could hear. Not for them. For yourself? And for the music? She nodded. He stepped back and folded his arms. Silence filled the room. She finally lifted her hands and placed them on the keys. The piano felt warm under her fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a slow breath. She tried to feel the melody inside her instead of the fear. Then she began. The first notes came out a little shaky as her fingers adjusted to the pressure. But after a few seconds, her breathing steadied and the music found its place. The room faded from her mind. The eyes watching her disappeared. All she felt was the familiar movement of the melody, the gentle rise and fall of the notes. She played slowly, carefully, letting each sound travel into the quiet room. Her hands were not perfect. Sometimes she pressed too softly, sometimes too firmly, but her emotion filled every note. She played not like a trained student, but like someone who understood music with her heart as she played. The students who had been whispering now watched silently. Some leaned forward, their expressions shifting. Even though her technique wasn't refined, something about her playing pulled them in. The maestro watched from a distance, his face unreadable, but his eyes sharp. He studied her hands, her posture, her focus, and the strange natural connection she had with the melody. It wasn't skill alone. It wasn't luck. It was something deeper when she reached the final notes. She let the sound linger for a moment before lifting her fingers. She sat completely still, afraid to look up. The room was silent. Then slowly the maestro stepped forward. He didn't clap. No one did. Instead, he rested his hand on the piano and said, "Stand." She stood, her heart racing. He looked at his students. What she has done is not something you learn from books, not something you learn from years alone. She listens better than any of you. She understands more than she realizes. Some students looked surprised. Some looked doubtful. But all of them listened. The maestro then turned to her. You may sit. She sat down on a nearby chair, her heart still pounding. She felt embarrassed, overwhelmed, and unsure of what she had done. The maestro addressed the room again. Let this be a reminder. Talent can come from anywhere. You cannot judge by where someone stands or what they have. You judge only by what they bring to the music. After that, the short gathering ended. Students began leaving the room, some casting curious glances at her. A few whispered softly, not unkindly this time, but in wonder. When the room was nearly empty, the maestro approached her. You did well, he said. She looked up, uncertain. I made mistakes, of course, he said. But mistakes do not matter if the heart is correct. Technique can be taught. Feeling cannot. A small warmth spread in her chest. You will continue to learn, he said. If you want to. I do, she said instantly. Then come tomorrow. She nodded. Over the next several weeks, her lessons changed. They became more intense, more focused. The maestro no longer taught her simple scales or basic exercises. He began teaching her structure, how to use her wrists, how to control volume, how to understand timing, how to read the flow of a piece beyond memory. Each day she arrived eager but nervous. She wanted to do well. She wanted to prove that she deserved the maestro's time. She wanted to grow. Some days were easy. Some were difficult. Some days her fingers felt stiff. Some days she couldn't get a rhythm right no matter how many times she tried. The maestro corrected her gently but firmly. Again, he would say, and she would try again. When she grew frustrated, he would tell her the piano does not rush. Do not rush yourself. Her progress became visible. Students who passed by often stopped for a moment to listen. They no longer looked at her with confusion, but with interest. Some even stayed after their own lessons to watch. One afternoon, as she practiced alone, 2 boys stood nearby. I don't know how she learned so fast, one whispered. Maybe she's been playing for years, the other said. She didn't respond. She just kept playing. The maestro watched from across the room, his eyes softening. He could see her dedication, her hunger, her drive. She didn't come for praise or attention. She came because something inside her needed the music. One day, he introduced her to a piece she had never heard before, one that required both control and emotion. One far more challenging than anything she had attempted. He played it once, slowly. She listened with her full attention, her eyes on his hands, her ears absorbing every shift in tone. Then he asked her to try. Her first attempt was messy. She stumbled, confused by the complexity. She felt disappointed, almost embarrassed. But the maestro said, "Good. Now again." She tried again. And again. Each time she improved a little more. Each time she discovered something new. Each time she understood a little deeper by the end of the week. She could play the piece from start to finish, not perfectly, but with a surprising sense of connection. The maestro did not smile, but something in his eyes changed. Something like quiet pride. "You are learning," he said. She felt her heart lift. But as weeks passed, the maestro noticed something else growing too: attention in the air, a subtle shift in the eyes of some students. Not all of them admired her progress. Some whispered behind her back. Some watched her with envy. Some wondered why she, a girl who didn't belong to the school, received so much of the maestro's time. One afternoon, she overheard 2 older students speaking near the doorway. "It isn't fair," one said. "We pay for lessons. She doesn't. She gets extra time too. She's not even that good. She just memorizes everything." Their words stung. She felt her chest tighten, her fingers freeze on the keys. The maestro heard them. He stepped out from behind the curtain where he had been arranging music sheets. "Do you think music belongs only to those who pay?" he asked calmly. The students stiffened. "Music belongs to those who give themselves to it," he continued. "If she works harder than you, that is her right. If she learns faster, that is her gift. If you wish to grow, focus on your own hands, not hers." The boys lowered their eyes and left. She stared at the keys, unsure how to feel. The maestro approached her. "Do not listen to them," he said. "But they're right," she whispered. "I don't belong here," he shook his head. "You belong anywhere your effort leads you." She felt her throat tighten. "Now play," he said. She placed her hands on the keyboard, her fingers shaking slightly. But she played. As weeks passed, her confidence grew again. She worked harder, stayed longer, and learned faster. The maestro pushed her with new challenges, new pieces, new methods. She absorbed everything. One day, after she finished playing a particularly emotional passage, the maestro stepped closer. "There is something important," he said. "You are ready for something more." She blinked. "More?" "Yes, a real performance." Her breath the days that followed felt different for both the girl and the maestro. Something had shifted in the room since the moment he stopped her halfway through her playing. There was a new kind of silence between them, not uncomfortable, but filled with thoughts neither of them fully understood yet. The maestro had spent his entire life teaching, guiding, and correcting, but he had never stood in front of someone like her. She had no formal training, no background in music, and no family history in the arts. Yet her fingers touched the keys as if she had been born for that very moment. When she stepped into the practice room on the next morning, she didn't know what to expect. She carried the same shy smile she always had, and her eyes quickly scanned the room to see who was watching. A few students were already gathered near the doorway, whispering in low voices. Some were curious. Others didn't look very happy that an unknown girl had suddenly become the center of attention. But she didn't say anything to anyone. She simply walked toward the piano, keeping her hands close to her sides. The maestro entered right after her. His steps were firm but not rushed, and he seemed to be carrying the same thoughts from the day before. He looked at her first, then at the piano, then back at the students who had gathered around. "Everyone outside," he said calmly. But his voice left no room for argument. A soft wave of disappointment moved through the crowd, but they obeyed. Within a minute, the room was empty, except for the two of them. The door closed behind the last student, leaving nothing but quiet air and the shining black piano waiting in the center. "Sit," the maestro said. She nodded and took her place on the wooden bench. Her hands rested on her lap as she waited. She didn't dare to ask what the maestro had planned. She just watched him as he stood beside her, almost as if he was studying her the same way she had studied him for months through the doorway. "You played yesterday with no fear," he finally said. "But performing in front of an audience is different." She didn't know how to respond. The truth was, she had been afraid yesterday. Not afraid of playing, but afraid of being seen. Afraid of disappointing him, of sounding wrong, of proving everyone right who thought she didn't belong there. But once her fingers touched the keys, that fear had disappeared, as if the piano itself had swallowed it. "I want to see how you learn," the maestro continued. "Not what you already know." She nodded again. He placed a sheet of music in front of her. She had seen such sheets before, of course, but she had never been able to read them. The notes looked like unfamiliar symbols stacked on lines. She stared at them quietly, trying to guess what they meant. "Do you know how to read this?" he asked. "No," she said softly. He wasn't surprised. Instead, he pulled a small wooden chair beside her and sat down. For the first time, he wasn't looking at her like a teacher evaluating a student. He was looking at her like someone wanting to understand her. He pointed at the first note and explained its name, the line it sat on, the sound it was supposed to make. She tried to follow, nodding slowly, as if absorbing every small detail. After a minute, he asked her to place her fingers on the keys. She did press, he said. A single, clean note filled the room. "That is this note," he said. Tapping the same symbol on the page, she watched his finger touching the paper, then looked at the piano, then at the paper again. Something clicked in her mind. Maybe not fully, but enough. They continued like this for a long time. The maestro guided her through each note with patience that surprised even him. He wasn't usually known for softness. Students often left his class with trembling hands and sweating brows. But with her, the room felt different. She wasn't careless. She wasn't lazy. She simply needed someone to show her how to connect the world inside her with the world on the paper. After an hour, he placed the sheet aside and said, "Now play." "What should I play?" "Anything," he said. Her hands rose carefully above the keys. She paused for a moment, her eyes drifting shut, as if she was listening to something inside her mind. Then she began to play, not fast, not loud, but with emotion that filled the room like warm light. The maestro listened, his arms crossed, not in judgment, but in wonder. She wasn't playing the music on the paper. She wasn't playing anything he had taught her today. She was playing something that came from a deeper place, as if the piano had always been waiting for her. When she finished, she pulled her hands back quickly, almost shyly, as if realizing she had lost herself in the moment. That, the maestro said quietly, is what makes you special. She blinked at him, unsure how to take those words. He stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a small notebook. He handed it to her. "This is for your lessons," he said. "You will write everything you learn here." Her hands held the notebook as if it were something precious. She nodded slowly, fighting the smile that wanted to rise. But the day wasn't over. Not even close. By the afternoon, the rumors had spread far beyond the music room. Students in other classes were talking about her. Some didn't believe the story. Others exaggerated it. Someone even said she had played a piece that only professionals could perform. When she stepped out into the hallway,
Ow!
she could feel all the eyes turning toward her. Some looked impressed. Others looked annoyed. A few whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "Is that really her? She just copied something she heard. She's not even a real student." She lowered her gaze and walked toward the exit. She didn't want trouble. She didn't want attention. All she wanted was the piano. Outside the building, she found her mother waiting near the street. As soon as her mother saw her, she smiled warmly. "How was it today?" The girl hesitated, then said, "Different. Good different." Her mother asked. She nodded. "I learned something new." Her mother placed a gentle hand on her back as they began walking home. She didn't ask for details. She never pushed too hard, knowing her daughter needed space to process things at her own pace. But the maestro wasn't done thinking about her inside his office. He stared at his calendar, tapping a finger against a date circled in red. A small performance was coming up soon. His students had been preparing for it for months. It wasn't a big concert, but it was important for the school. He had already planned who would play which piece. But now, he wasn't so sure. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes for a moment, and replayed the memory of her playing in his mind. The simplicity, the emotion, the way she made each note feel alive. Could she handle a performance? Would she freeze under pressure? Or would she shine in a way no one expected? That night, he sat at the piano alone, letting his fingers wander across the keys. He wasn't practicing. He was thinking. The next day, when she returned, he told her something that made her eyes widen. "I want you to perform at the school event." She froze. "Me?" she asked, almost whispering. "Yes," he said. "You." She didn't know what to say. The idea scared her. She loved playing the piano, but the thought of people watching her made her heart beat too fast. "You don't have to decide now," he said. "But I want you to think about it." She nodded slowly. Her hands were shaking slightly. But the maestro pretended not to notice. They continued their lesson, but she couldn't focus fully. Her mind kept drifting back to his words, performing on stage. In front of strangers. When she returned home, she didn't tell her mother right away. Instead, she sat near the window. Looking outside as the sunlight softened into evening, she asked herself over and over, was she really ready for something like that? Could she do it? The next morning, she found the courage to give her answer. She walked into the music room, stood in front of the maestro, and said softly, "I'll try." The morning of the performance arrived with a quiet kind of heaviness in the air, the kind that comes before something uncertain. The girl woke up earlier than usual, long before the sun had fully risen. She sat at the edge of her bed for a few minutes, letting the soft light of dawn slip across the room. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers brushing against each other nervously. She wasn't thinking about the crowd or the stage just yet. She was thinking about the piano, about how every time she touched the keys, she felt something calm inside her, something steady. She hoped that feeling would be there today too. She hoped it wouldn't leave her when she needed it most. Her mother noticed she was awake and walked into the room quietly. "You're up early," she said. "I couldn't sleep," the girl admitted. Her mother sat beside her and gently fixed a loose strand of her hair. "It's a big day," she said softly. The girl nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the window again. She wasn't sure how to explain the strange mix of excitement and fear she felt. She wasn't used to being the center of anything. She liked being unnoticed, like a little shadow in the hallway. But today, she couldn't hide. Her mother didn't give a speech or tell her not to worry. She simply held her hand for a moment, and that small gesture was enough. By the time they reached the school, the building was already filled with quiet activity. Students moving in and out of rooms, teachers carrying papers and instruments, the soft echo of tuning from behind closed doors. The performance wasn't huge, but it mattered to the people involved. When the girl entered the music hall, the maestro was already there. He stood near the piano on the stage, adjusting the bench and checking the sheet music for his other students. He looked up as soon as he saw her. "You came early," he said. She nodded. "I wanted to see the room before everyone arrives." "That's a good idea," he said. She walked up the steps to the stage. It felt much bigger than she remembered from when she had seen it as an outsider. The piano sat in the center like a waiting giant, its black surface reflecting the soft lights above. "Can I sit?" she asked. "Of course," the maestro said. She moved toward the piano and gently sat down on the bench. Her feet didn't fully reach the ground, but she settled herself comfortably. Her hands hovered over the keys, not touching them yet, just feeling their nearness. The maestro watched her from the side. "Remember," he said quietly, "today isn't about being perfect. It's about showing who you are through the music." She swallowed and nodded. Double quotes. "Do you want to play something now?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. Her fingers touched the keys, and she began to play a soft melody. It wasn't the piece she would perform later. It was something simple, something she had learned on her own long before the maestro had ever noticed her. Something that reminded her why she loved the piano in the first place. The sound filled the empty hall gently, like a warm breeze. When she finished, she felt a little more relaxed. "You'll be fine," the maestro said. Soon the students began arriving. Some walked past her with polite smiles. Some glanced at her with curiosity. A few whispered among themselves again, just as before. But she didn't let the whispers reach her this time. She had something else to focus on. The hall slowly filled with parents, siblings, and teachers. The soft murmur of the crowd settled into the room as people found their seats. The girl stood backstage now, her heart beating a little too fast. She tried taking deep breaths, but each exhale only made her feel more aware of the moment. The maestro approached her. "You're the last performer," he said. "You'll close the show," she nodded, though her stomach tightened even more at the thought. The program began. One by one, students performed their pieces. Some played violin, some flute, some piano. The girl listened from backstage, her fingers tapping softly against her dress in nervous movements. She admired the courage it took for each performer to stand under the lights. But with every passing minute, her turn crept closer. The maestro checked on her once more. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," she admitted. "That's good," he said. "It means you care." Then finally, after the second-to-last performance ended, the maestro walked onto the stage. He cleared his throat gently and spoke into the microphone. "Our final performer today," he said, "is someone very new to this hall. Someone you may not know yet. But sometimes talent finds its way into the world in unexpected ways." He looked toward the backstage curtain as he said the final words. "Please welcome her to the stage." The audience clapped politely, not knowing what to expect. The girl stepped out slowly. The lights were brighter than she imagined. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her, some curious, some supportive, some unsure. Her breath caught for a moment, but she didn't stop walking. She reached the piano, bowed slightly, then sat down as her hands rose above the keys. The hall fell completely silent. She closed her eyes for a second. She remembered the hallway where she used to stand and listen. She remembered the first time the maestro stopped her playing. She remembered the small notebook he had given her. She remembered her mother's hand holding hers that morning. And then she began. The first note landed softly. It's like a gentle drop of rain. Then the next one followed, and then the next. Her hands moved smoothly, carrying the melody forward with quiet emotion. The hall remained still, the audience barely breathing. She wasn't playing to impress anyone. She wasn't playing to prove anything. She was playing because the music inside her had always needed a place to go, and now it had one. As the piece grew, the notes became fuller, deeper, filled with feelings she had never spoken out loud. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, confident and steady. The music rose and fell like a story being told without words. The maestro watched from the side of the stage. His expression changed slowly, first proud, then surprised, then something deeper. When she reached the most emotional part of the piece, he felt a chill. It came not from fear, but from realization. She wasn't just talented. She wasn't just gifted. She had something beyond all of that. When the final note sounded, it hung in the air for a long, fragile second. Then the hall erupted. People stood from their seats. Some clapped loudly, others softly, but all of them clapped with genuine surprise. The girl sat frozen on the bench for a moment, wide-eyed, unsure how to respond. She had never imagined people would react like this. The maestro stepped forward onto the stage. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, guiding her to stand. When she rose and bowed, the applause grew even louder. After she left the stage, She felt almost lightheaded from everything that had just happened. The hallway felt different. The school felt different. Even the air outside felt different when she stepped out later. Her mother rushed to her with open arms. "You did it," she whispered. The girl hugged her tightly. "I didn't think I could." "But you did," her mother said. "And you were beautiful." Back inside, the maestro stood alone near the stage, staring at the piano. He had taught many students in his life, some skilled, some hard-working, some promising. But today, he had seen something rare. He had seen a beginning. When the girl approached him, he turned to her with a soft smile. "You changed something today," he said. She looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You showed everyone what real music feels like," he said. "Not because of training, not because of rules, but because it came from inside you." She didn't know how to answer. She simply lowered her eyes shyly. The maestro continued, "This is only the start. If you choose to keep going, I will teach you. Properly. Fully. Not because you need it, but because you deserve it." Her eyes widened a little. "You want to teach me?" "I would be honored to," he said. The girl didn't speak for several seconds. Then she nodded slowly, with a small spark of confidence she hadn't felt before. "Then I'll learn," she said. The maestro gave a gentle nod. "Good. We begin tomorrow." As she walked out of the hall with her mother, she felt something she had never felt so clearly before. A beginning. You couldn't see it on her face. And she didn't say it out loud, but deep inside. She knew that the piano had become more than just an instrument. It had become her voice. And from that day onward, she was no longer the girl who watched from the hallway. She was the girl who played.